But today we're going to be talking about Freud's psychological theories and viewing them against the backdrop of the history we've already been studying. Freud's theories are interesting in a number of different respects, and one of those is that he is giving us an explanation, perhaps, for what he sees as irrationality. Here it's important to think not only about the context of the 20th century. His first book, The Interpretation of Dreams, appears right around the turn of the century. This the version here was published in 1903. But in addition to that, really against the backdrop of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment held that reason was supreme. And Freud began to think, even by 1903, that that is not the full story. You cannot account for human behavior by assuming that we are rational animals. That understanding of us goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle defines a human being as a rational animal. In Freud, it turns out rationality is sort of a cover, it's a disguise. We're fundamentally irrational animals according to Freud. The theory was influential before the First World War, but it gained a great deal of currency after the war, and in circles that were much broader than psychoanalytic circles. Why? Because what had been revealed, a lot of people thought, in World War I, was blind irrationality. A lot of people went to the front lines, came back thinking that they had seen the heart of darkness. They had seen something deep and disturbing underneath the surface rationality of human beings as individuals and of the social order. And so they had this sense of peeling back the surface to see something underneath, something that was deeply disturbing. So much so that many of them had a hard time fitting back into normal life. So Freud came along as somebody who gave an explanation for this same book. In the end, we aren't really explained by rationality, we're explained by deep, dark, irrational forces that drive us. So his theories had a tremendous cultural power. There are three stages of Freud's thought. The first stage, an early stage, where he concentrates on the interpretation of dreams. Then there is a mature theory in the development of psychoanalysis, and we'll be talking some about that today. And then finally, he expands the theory to cover anthropology, sociology, theories of government, and a variety of other things in a general analysis of civilization. And so there we get a lot of cultural commentary in works like The Future of an Illusion, or Civilization and Its Discontents. But today we're going to concentrate mostly on that early theory, the interpretation of dreams, and what follows from it. Here is the very beginning of the book. Freud says there is a psychological technique which makes it possible to interpret dreams. Moreover, if this procedure is employed, every dream reveals itself as a psychical structure which has two important properties. First of all, it has a meaning. Now that's already implicit in the idea that we can interpret it. If we can interpret a dream, it must have some sort of meaning, it must have a significance. But also it can be inserted at an assignable point in the mental activities of waking life. So it not only has a meaning, but it has a certain relationship to what the mind is doing in waking life. So we have a way not only of interpreting dreams, but also a way of linking them to the rest of life, understanding how sleep and the consciousness we have during sleep relates to the consciousness we have during everyday life. So that's the goal of the theory. And as you can see here, right away it was heralded as a major development. Here's an El Paso newspaper, and you can see the headline there, Why Scientists Claim Every Dream Has Its Meaning, and that it's an account of Freud and his theory. Right above, Marvels of the Water World, and secret thoughts and longings you didn't know you had, revealed in dreams. That bigger headline there is the really significant part of Freud's theory. It turns out dreams are not just things that have a meaning, not just things that can be interpreted in light of waking life, but things that really reveal deep things about you. Now that's a new idea about dreams. If you think about ancient writings on dreams, the idea that dreams have a meaning, that they can be interpreted, is not really that remarkable. That is an ancient idea. Think of the story of Joseph and his dreams. And the Pharaoh paying attention to the dreams of the 7 fat calves and the 7 thin calves and all of that. So that is an idea that goes back a long way. But dreams then were held to be prophetic, revealing something about the nature of the world, maybe messages from God or from the gods, depending on the culture, and so forth. Here the thought is, no, they reveal something about you. It's not something about the world, it's not something about a divine message, it's instead something about you, your deepest longings, your deepest desires. So Freud continues. I shall endeavor to elucidate the processes to which the strangeness and obscurity of dreams are due, and to deduce from those processes the nature of the psychical forces by whose concurrent or mutually opposing action dreams are generated. So, in short, he's going to tell us basically where dreams come from and why they feel different from waking life. So, those are important questions. What's the source of dreams? And why are they strange in some ways? Well, let's pause here and think about the ways in which dreams are strange. How do dreams differ from waking life? What are dreams like? Well, I'm really asking you. This is a rhetorical question. They are more or less realistic. Some of them are quite realistic. You feel as if you're very much there. Others, especially after you wake up, you think, whoa, that was very strange. Yes. Good. Some can be really scary, like nightmares. Yeah.
They're fragmented.
They're fragmented, yes. Often there are very rapid scene changes in dreams. For a while in college when I was studying Freud, actually, I started keeping a journal of my dreams. I tend to forget most dreams shortly after I wake up. But if you actually have a journal and you write them down as soon as you wake up, you sort of train yourself to remember them. And the dreams I ended up writing down were bizarre, just that way. They're very rapid scene changes. Here I am with a distance, sailing away from Troy. And here suddenly I am, in Pennsylvania, my grandfather's hunting cabin. And now suddenly I'm blah, 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 blah. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, how is this possible? So there are lots and lots of bizarre shifts in dreams. Yeah?
Laws of physics and ethics don't really apply.
Good, the laws of physics and ethics don't really apply. I mean, you might do things and you see other people doing things that are shocking and you never actually do. And also it seems like there are all sorts of impossible things going on. One of the strangest things is something scary happens and you're trying to get away and you can't move, right? Ordinarily, if somebody starts chasing you, you can run away. But in a dream, it seems like you can't really run. It seems like you're trying to get away. It's like you're heavily lead weights on your feet and so on. So there are lots of ways in which normal things, normal norms, and normal laws don't really seem to apply. Other features of dreams. Yeah?
The point of view is not always first person yourself.
Ooh, good. Sometimes it's very clearly you, but not always. Sometimes it's as if you're just looking at this scene. And that's strange. I mean, that doesn't ordinarily happen in waking life. Yeah?
You don't question what's going on.
You don't question what's going on. That's right. I mean, strange things start happening around you. Like suddenly, you find you're sitting in the classroom and suddenly there's a dramatic scene change and you're in the middle of Spain. You would think, what's going on? But in a dream, somehow it's all normal. Right? Oh, yeah, UT, Spain, whatever. Yeah.
You might act irrationally, or you might act insulting.
Ooh, good. You might act irrationally. You might act in ways that aren't characteristic of you at all. And so it's as if the normal principles of your personality are somehow suspended along with the laws of physics or the laws of ethics. Yeah?
Sometimes you see people that you don't know in waking life, that you meet people in your dreams that you've never seen before.
Oh, good. Sometimes you might meet people in dreams that you've never seen before, or have this sense, I don't know, I've had this a number of times, where I'm at some place and it feels very familiar in the dream. It's a house, let's say, that I feel that I know well. And I wake up and think, whoa, where was that? And I realize that was completely unfamiliar. I don't recognize that from any place I've ever been. Yeah.
But you don't feel pain.
I don't feel what?
Pain.
Pain. Yeah, I don't feel pain. Exactly. Bad things might happen to me in the dream, and somehow it doesn't really hurt me. This monster that's chasing me, maybe I run into a wall as I'm running away, or try to run away, and somehow I don't feel that. And so, yeah, pain doesn't seem to affect me in the dream. Anything else? Yeah?
Sometimes control.
You can sometimes control it. That's interesting. Most of the time you can't. And you can't in a way that's stronger than the sense in which you can't in waking life. I mean, in waking life, you get really unhappy, and here you can just walk out the door. And you can change your scene. But in a dream, you feel out of control of that, for the most part. On the other hand, sometimes, and I think when you're close to waking, you can actually control things. You can think like, I don't want to wake up yet. This is a nice dream. And fall back into the same dream. Or maybe you can think, stop thinking about this. I don't know if you've had this sensation. You have a nightmare, and then you wake up and you think, oh, that's terrible. You go back to sleep, and it's like the back of the night, and you have this sensation of willing yourself. No, I don't want to be in this. This is a dream. Stop this. And so, yes, all of those things seem possible. Now, if you look at examples and think, well, can we tell whether or not we're dreaming? Some philosophers have thought you can't. Descartes, for example, says, as he's writing by the fire, I've often had the sense that I was here, and yet really I was fast asleep. Or here is a great example from a Chinese philosopher, Zhuangzi. Once upon a time I dreamt I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, unaware that I was myself. Soon I awaked, and there I was, veritably myself again. Now, I don't know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I'm now a butterfly dreaming I'm a man. So, can you tell whether you're awake or dreaming right now? I bet you think you're awake, but how do you know? I think I'm awake, but maybe I fell asleep at my desk. And really, I'm just dreaming that I'm giving the lecture. A Freudian explanation might be, hey, I feel guilty about missing my own lecture, and so my dream is maybe saying, oh, this is fine, sleep, you're there, you're giving the lecture after all. How do you know you're awake right now? Everything's moving too slow. Yes, this is too boring, dreams are more interesting. That's one possible explanation. Yeah?
In waking life by Richard Linklater, you can tell your dreams, you can't read a digital clock face, and you can't turn a light off or on.
Oh, good. So you do have some control over your environment now that you don't have then. I mean, often people will test this by pinching themselves. And that always struck me as a silly thing, although maybe it's explained by your feeling of pain. Ooh, if I can feel pain, I must be awake. So actually, you would have a good explanation for why that works. But here's another one. It's like, hey, I do have some control over my environment. And that's something I don't seem to have in a dream. Lights go on and off in dreams. I don't actually succeed in making it happen. Yeah?
Usually new information, like, you wouldn't have this information, you know, behind the counter.
Okay, new information. Yeah, do you ever learn anything in a dream? Now, I've occasionally had ideas in dreams. I was working on a problem, a proof, when I was in graduate school, and I kept getting insights in the middle of the night. There was this hard step in the proof, and I couldn't get past it, couldn't figure out how to do it. And so I kept thinking about it, and I would wake up in the middle of the night with this great insight, I thought, saying like, I figured it out, I figured it out. And then I would go back to sleep, and I'd have no memory of it in the morning. So I started putting a pad beside the bedside so that I could wake up in the middle of the night, scribble down the insight from the dream, and then go back to sleep. Well, when I looked at those things in the morning, they were either completely unintelligible, or there was like an obvious fallacy in it. Like, that won't work. And so, you know, yeah, you can have these coherent, quote unquote, coherent thoughts. You can think you're learning something in the dream, but usually that turns out to be nonsense. I came up with I dreamt a while ago, about a year ago, that I was at the American Philosophical Association meetings. And these colleagues of mine said, so you're giving the next talk? And I said, what? They said, yeah, you're giving the next talk. I said, I didn't know I was giving a talk. I'm just here in the audience to listen. I said, no, you've got to talk. Well, what am I supposed to talk about? And they gave me this title. So I get up there, and here I am in front of this room full of philosophers, and I just start making stuff up about this title. But then I woke up, and I remembered what I had said. I thought, that's not bad. So I mentioned it to Josh Dever and David Sosa, and they both said, that's really stupid. So anyway, yeah, you might think you're learning something in a dream or even getting some deep insight, but usually you're not. If you look at artistic representations of dreams, you see all sorts of things meant to suggest the fancifulness of it, the fact that they don't seem very much like reality. There are all sorts of different things here, a bunch of bubbles. Yeah, there are people playing flutes in the jungle with cats. Well, I get the cat part. Okay, now here is Freud's idea. He's trying to say, okay, there are all these differences. What explains them? Where are dreams coming from? And what is a dream really all about? And he ends up with the following thesis. He says, when the work of interpretation has been completed, we perceive that a dream is a fulfillment of a wish. So every dream is fulfilling some sort of wish. You have some desire, and the desire is represented as fulfilled in the dream. Yeah?
But there's a thing called the death wish, like offer, and that's, how does that fit in?
Yeah, we'll get to that at the end. Because after World War I, he starts treating all these people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And they have very disturbing dreams, replaying things that happened to them or happened to people they knew in the war. And so that's a really good example of something that's hard to explain on this theory, do you really want to get your arm blown off again? What's happening here? So we'll get to that at the end. But yes, that's a very disturbing possibility, because we might think, look, that doesn't seem like a fulfillment of a wish, but nevertheless Freud says it is. What do geese dream of? He says, well, they dream of maize. They want to eat. Well, that's what we're doing. We're really expressing wishes. And that explains how you could fit this into the rest of life. We have these desires that are expressed consciously, but also expressed in dreams subconsciously. And they're constructed by a highly complicated activity of the mind, he says. Well, it does seem like, yes, a dream is a wish your heart makes, goes the song. And he gives lots of examples of dreams that are wish fulfillments. And some dreams really probably do have that character. But there's an obvious objection. You've mentioned one that really confronts him after the war when he's treating these patients. But even in 1903, there should have been a really obvious example of a problem with this. I tell you, yeah, dreams are all about fulfilling your wishes. Every dream is a wish fulfillment. Why does that seem not true? Nightmares, exactly. Okay? And so really, it doesn't have to be necessarily a post-traumatic stress type of thing. Just nightmares. There are lots of dreams that aren't particularly pleasant. And so you can think, wait, there is an obvious objection. Nightmares. If every dream is the fulfillment of a wish, why isn't every dream pleasant? I sort of think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have one of those Southside shakes I thought about? So why aren't my dreams filled with cupcakes and Southside shakes and all sorts of wonderful things? Well, Freud says, yeah, well, there is this obvious objection. Nightmares, but really not just nightmares. That says, by the way, in case you can't read it, I've been your nightmares eating your souls. But there are all sorts of dreams where you have fears, where you have anxieties. You might dream that you walk into the midterm exam and you don't know anything, right? And you're sitting there in your underwear or whatever. You might have dreamed all sorts of unpleasant things or events. So why doesn't this by itself refute Freud's thesis? And here are some artistic representations of nightmares. Neat little dude, look at the horse in the background saying, whoa! Another horse symbol. There are all sorts of these. Well, anyway, here is Freud's response. We've got to draw a distinction between the manifest and the latent content of dreams. Now, this should sound familiar. We have the manifest content, the content that's there on the surface. That is the content that you're aware of. However, there is also a latent, a hidden content that underlies it, that explains it, and that is the true content of the dream. So the manifest content in these cases, he says, yes, it's distressing, it's filled with fear or anxiety, constitutes a nightmare. However, if you look at the latent content, it really is a wish fulfillment. So what appears to be disturbing, what appears to be frightening, really is the fulfillment of a wish. Well now, how is that possible? Because after all, a lot of nightmares don't seem to be fulfillment of wishes. Suppose I do have a nightmare where I'm being chased by some sort of monster. What kind of wish could that be fulfilling? That doesn't make much sense. But he says, well, in cases where the wish fulfillment is unrecognizable, where it's been disguised, there must have existed some inclination to put up a defense against the wish. Owing to this defense, the wish was unable to express itself except in distorted shape. So the idea is that you've got some wish that you're not willing to admit you have, even to your own conscious mind. And that's what gets expressed as a nightmare. You have this deep, this dark, this hidden desire that even you cannot face. And when it comes bubbling up in the nighttime, your mind and distorts it into something else frightening because it's frightened of that deep inner wish. But what you're afraid of is not the monster, it is some wish of your own. That's the thought. So here's how it goes. We have a couple of different psychic forces operating in the mind. One of them is responsible for the desire. There is this deep, dark desire. It constructs the wish expressed by the dream. But then there's another that is basically the censor. And it sits in the mind saying, it's a good desire. I'd like a pizza too. You can think that consciously. Oh, you want to sleep with your mother? No, that's a terrible desire. Get back down there. Okay? It acts as the censor of all of these. And so it forcibly brings about distortion in the expression of the wish. It permits thoughts to enter consciousness, sometimes, but sometimes only in a distorted form. So some thoughts, perfectly fine. You're sitting there in a math class and you think, wait, I'm trying to get the derivative of this function. Mine says derivatives of function. That's all right. Think about that. But then you think something else, and the mind says, repressed, get back down there. Other things, the mind says, well, I'll let that out, but only wearing a disguise. So, there is a first agency, which is creative, he says. The dreams express wishes on its part. But then there's a second agency that's basically defensive. Defending yourself, defending the mind against these deep wishes of the first part. And so, sometimes it proves them, sometimes not. Here is a sort of graphic representation of this in one form. In the way this later gets expressed, there are different parts. I don't actually find that one very helpful. So let me move to this one. We've got a picture like this. There is this creative agency. That's the bottom half of the circle. And it has certain desires. And then there is a censor there at that middle level. And consciousness is up above. So you might think of these desires as bubbling up from down below. And by the way, the theory here is very much hydraulic. It is a question of things bubbling up and this force on one part forcing something out in another part. If you go into the details of this theory, it's clear that he's thinking about a sort of system of water pressure as the basic dynamic of the mind. And that's what's happening here. This is there's a force coming up, and what happens to it? Sometimes the censor represses it, sends it back down. It's repression if it's subconscious, according to Freud, and called suppression if it's conscious. Sometimes you might be dimly aware of this, and you say, I'm not going to think about that. But more often, it's repression. It's something the subconscious mind does on its own. And so consciousness is never aware at all of the desire. Sometimes it's accepted and gets through, and so you're aware of your own desire. But sometimes it gets through, but in a distorted form. And so the idea is that dreams are typically that. It's a question of some desire on the subconscious level being allowed into consciousness, but only in a distorted form. And really that's true even of pleasant dreams for the most part. It still gets distorted in some ways, but for unpleasant ones, definitely. Now, why does it matter whether you're awake or asleep? After all, what I've just said looks like it should apply to both waking life and sleep. But he says, well, sleep lowers the resistance of the second agency. So the idea is that when you're awake, that second agency, the censor, is also awake. Sitting there, manning the guard post, very, carefully, and saying, "Hey, you, bad desire, get out of here, get back down there." And so these things aren't allowed into conscious thought at all, or very little, during waking life. But what happens to the sentry in the middle of the night? The sentry gets sleepy. The sentry says, I'm tired. And here comes this nasty desire. And he's not going to just let it go through, but he's aware enough to do something, but not really awake enough to stop it, and so the resistance gets lowered, and the dream comes through, but in a distorted form. So Freud says that's why dreams are so important. They provide a unique window into the unconscious mind. During waking life, we can't really see into the subconscious mind because the censor is there at full alert. But when you're asleep, the censor gets drowsy, and so things from the subconscious mind start creeping through. So we get headlines like this: Mystery of Dreams Revealed. And this idea that, yes, there are these deep longings, deep desires that you have that are revealed only in your dreams. Now, the essential nature of consciousness then is what? Well, it's very special. You might say you have to have a ticket to get into consciousness. There are all these things bubbling up from the subconscious mind, but only some of them get through. And so admission to consciousness is something like a separate psychic act. The earlier view of consciousness was pretty much that it was a passive thing. The world has an impact on us, and we passively receive these impressions from the world, and then we can maybe do something with it through reason and thinking about things. But Freud is saying, look, first of all, the mind is much more active than that. It's not just passive. And secondly, it's not just through reason that it does things. These are basically irrational forces, both the origin of the desires and then the way in which the censor operates and distorts things. This does get expressed in the more mature theory, in a general theory of psychoanalysis. And so we're familiar with those parts, really from popular culture, if not from studying Freud directly. There is the ego. It's the I. The ego is just the Latin term for I. It is the self. It's the part that relates to the external world. It's the part of you that decides. It's the part of you that acts. If there is one of these three parts of the soul that is really you in Freud, it's that. It's the ego. But there is also the superego. It observes the self and then makes judgments. It's basically your conscience. It is an internalization of parental authority via identification in Freud's theory. That is to say, it starts out when you're a baby with your parents saying, no, don't do that. In fact, I was talking to somebody whose kids have just gone off to live elsewhere. One's in college and one has gotten married after graduating college. And she was saying that, yes, I just spent, I once had a mind, but I've spent the last 25 years saying, no, don't touch that, you'll get hurt. No, don't eat that, that's bad, etc. And, well, yeah, parents do a lot of that at the beginning, but then you internalize a lot of these rules, and you start telling yourself no. That's what the superego is. It's the superego, a part of yourself representing your parents almost, and saying no to certain things. But what about that dark, creative agency that is the source of these wishes in the first place? That is the id. That's just the Latin word for it. It's alien to the ego. It's dark. It's inaccessible. It is really what expresses and is the source of instinctual needs and desires. It also is the source of energy. And it operates according to something he calls the pleasure principle. That is to say, it wants to seek pleasure. And so its desires are pretty easily explained. It desires pleasure. And if there is any generalization of all the id wants, it's that. The id wants pleasure of various kinds. And then it's a question of the ego, how to respond to those demands for these pleasures. So here is a picture in German. The id, S, is down at the bottom, then ich, the ego is there in the middle, the über, the superego is there along the side, or here is another one. We've got the id at the bottom, we've got the superego at the top of this one, and then the ego in between, who is trying to understand all of this. By the way, this, Freud says, is why life is hard. Not just because I insist on putting slides up there in German, but because we're torn between these two forces. On the one side, we've got the angel, the superego, saying, be good, Homer. And then on the other side, we have the devil, the id, that says, but no, I want this, the evil Homer. And Homer, the ego, is trying to sort out the demands of these two at the same time that he's dealing with the world. So it's not just a question of reconciling the desires of the id with the commands of the superego. It's hard to get what you want in the world. And so the ego has to solve all these problems at the same time that it's reconciling those two competing requirements. And here's another little graphic. The id saying, I want it now. The superego saying, you can't have it, it's not right. And the ego says, I need to do a bit of planning to get it. Well, anyway. Each one is governed by a certain principle. And so the id, we've already talked about, it's governed by the pleasure principle. Seek pleasure. Go for it. The ego is governed by what he calls the reality principle, which is adapt yourself to the external world to meet its demands. Meet your demands only to the extent that they're compatible with the way the world is and compatible with the desires of the superego. The superego's principle is really just morality. Do what's right. So you've got the id saying, I want this, go for pleasure. The superego saying, do the right thing. And the ego in between saying, okay, it's up to me to figure out what to do and how to actually deal with the world in getting what I want. So the ego has to meet all three constraints, those imposed by the id, the superego, and the world. That's why it's so hard to be a human being. Now, we get to the point of your question, beyond the pleasure principle. This is the state of the theory through the teens and up to the beginning of the 20s. But then he starts treating all these people who have come back from the war and who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. And now he says, wait, these aren't just ordinary nightmares. These are horrible nightmares. These are things that often occur to people in the middle of waking life even, and they don't seem to express dreams at all. They don't want to experience what they've gone through again. Let's say this guy did see his best buddy killed and his arm was blown off. He doesn't want to go through that again. So at the manifest level, there's no explanation. He clearly doesn't desire that experience again. But what about the latent level? What desire does this express? Freud says there's no obvious desire. I mean, is this a distortion of some sexual desire? or of some other kind of desire? He can't find a desire that could plausibly be a sort of account of. And so what on earth can he do? Well, what are his options? How can he explain this phenomenon of people experiencing again horrible, horrible things that they clearly don't want to have to experience again? In fact, they come to him saying, stop the dreams. I lived through this once, I don't want to have to live through it repeatedly. So, how can he explain this? What could you say about these cases? Yeah?
Their wishes for the outcome would have been different.
Good, that's actually what I think he should have said. Their wishes for the outcome would be different. In fact, what he does here is introduce something, as we'll see, quite bizarre. But it seems to me he has a much better answer. I'm not, by the way, a Freudian in dreams. A lot of my dreams are actually really boring and have to do with things that happened the previous day. And one of the most prominent contemporary theories is that most dreams are just basically little snapshots of your mind as its files, information from the previous day. What you're taking is a bunch of experiences, a bunch of things, and sorting them and filing them, discarding some, keeping others. Anyway, I'm not saying all dreams are like this, but a lot of my dreams anyway are pretty dull. It seems to me not to fulfill any desire, but just sort of like scenes from the previous day. However, he has a pretty good explanation of this thing. In fact, maybe it's better than for the boring dream. He can say, here's what's going on. Your mind is trying to find a way out. Here you are in the same situation. You want it to be different. And so what's happening is the mind is replaying it, trying to find a solution. You were sitting there, your friend was sitting there, your arm was blown off, he died, and your mind is thinking, let's replay it and see if we can get a different outcome. Is there some way to change what happened? How could this problem have been solved? How could we have avoided it? So I think that's what he should have said. In fact, that's not what he says, though, and he doesn't face too many options. One possibility is to say, look, the normal function of a dream has just been disrupted somehow. Normally, dreams are wish fulfillments, but here something has gone radically wrong. The normal functioning of the dream is not working properly. Here, the dream is doing something differently. Much as in a patient with a disease, you might say, normally this organ works this way, but in your case, it's not working that way. There's something wrong. I have a friend who's got kidney problems, and you could say, normally a kidney acts as a filter. Your kidneys aren't filtering. Well, that's why you have to be hooked up to dialysis. And so you might say, yeah, in your case, the function has been impaired. You could have said that. A second option. Among the dreamer's wishes are some masochistic ones. Maybe at some level you actually felt as if you deserve to be punished. Maybe you now feel as if you deserve to be punished. After all, your friend died. Maybe you think you did something wrong. So maybe this is your mind punishing you. Here, a dream is an attempt at the fulfillment of the wish. That's what he does in the new introductory lectures. He says, well, I shouldn't have said a dream is a wish fulfillment. It's an attempt at a wish fulfillment, but sometimes it's frustrated. And here is a case where it's somehow being frustrated. In fact, I suppose you could say that's a very general way of incorporating this idea that you wish things had been different. And this is the mind trying at the fulfillment of that wish and then failing. But then, of course, there's another possibility never mentioned by Freud. The theory is, and it's slipped off the slide, which is appropriate because that's where Freud would want to speak. The theory is false. Dreams are wish fulfillments. And so that's a possibility. But he never considers that. He assumes that he can come up with some explanation. And so the background here is, well, by the time he's in the 20s, he's thinking actually the energy of the id is always sexual energy. So its desires are really always sexual in some way. But this doesn't seem sexual. And so he says, what's going on here is some desire to just repeat an experience. Something horrible in this case, but nevertheless you have this desire to repeat it. Now, why would you have the desire or compulsion to repeat an experience? At first, he adds that as an additional drive. He says, okay, in addition to a drive to fulfill wishes, we must have this drive to repeat experiences. But then he says, well, wait a minute. That's very strong. Where is it coming from? He says, the desire to repeat something is a desire for the past. But what preceded organic life on Earth? Inorganic material. So actually, this is a desire for the inorganic. It is a desire to be unified again with nature and not to be conscious at all. And so he calls it a death wish. He says the aim of all life is death. Now some of you are looking at me going, and that's the way I feel about it too. Wait, You have a desire to repeat experiences, even unpleasant experiences. And I get that. I mean, if you ever had a sore tooth, or, you know, you keep like putting your tongue over there and probing it, and you're like, ah, hurts. Ah, it hurts. Ah, it hurts. Right? Or there's something sore on your head, and you keep going, oh, that hurts. Yeah, it hurts. So, all right, people can do that. I kind of get that. But then to say, well, but hold on a second, that's a desire for the past. But what was in the past? Just inorganic life. The past was death. So you desire death. That seems like a stretch. Yeah.
Is it kind of like there's this idea by the Marquis to say that like we actually desire ugly things because they're complex and they cause like memory and difficulty because they're simple. So we almost desire this like negative aspect because it's like it's complex and causes us to feel or just this simple thing.
That would be an interesting variant on this. That is to say, maybe we desire the unpleasant, the ugly. So we not only desire our wishes to be fulfilled, we desire unpleasant experiences too. In this case, he goes further and he says, well, it's actually death. But I think you're right, they're in the same family. It's not the same response, but it's a closely aligned response. And so here's the problem with that, or at least one problem. If you've got, maybe I should just ask you, I mean, how is that to say, well, here's the thing, you have a desire for pleasant experiences, but you also have a desire for unpleasant experiences. So your dream is pleasant, awesome, you're fulfilling your desire for the pleasant. You have an unpleasant experience in the dream, great, you're fulfilling your desire for the unpleasant. You die in the dream, or your friend dies, hey, you seek death, you have a desire for death. How is that as a theory of dreams? Yeah.
Or it's like value happens if it has sex, it's like you have to have like I guess the rewards
Good. If I desire the pleasant and the unpleasant, then you might think, wait a minute, I don't actually understand what's going on. We seem to have some way of explaining the difference between the pleasant dream and the unpleasant dream. Why are nightmares experienced as nightmares? Why do people with post-traumatic stress disorder want to get over it? Why don't they say, whoa, I have this great desire to experience the past, and I have this great desire for death, and I dream, my buddy got killed again. Awesome! It's not like that, right? We experience some of our desires as pleasant, and others as unpleasant. And so first of all, you start losing the sense of what a desire is. Surely it's really important to us whether this is experienced as pleasant or unpleasant. We tend to think the pleasant fulfills our desire, and that frustration of a desire is unpleasant. And so once you say, when you desire the unpleasant, or you desire death, all of a sudden it seems like I lose my grip on what a desire even is. And there's some important distinction that's somehow being left out. So that's one reason you might think something is going wrong. Well, Freud elaborates all of this into a broad theory of culture and civilization. He says society at large faces the same conflict as the ego. It has to meet the constraints of the id. Really, all of our desires, it has to meet the constraints of morality, what is right, and also it has to meet the constraints of the external world. And so we as a civilization have to do the same thing. We have to create a structure that enables people to pursue their desires, that does it within a framework of morality, and also deals with the world. Now, so far, so good. But he says, look, this means conflict is inevitable. Because society now has to enact rules that tell you what you may or may not do. So it's not just your superego anymore, or your parents saying, don't do that. Now society is going to have to take over that role and start saying, don't do that. And that leads to a conflict. It leads to conflicts with your desires, with the id. And it also is going to produce conflicts between reality and desire. After all, my desires might conflict with your desires. And so it turns out that we can't all satisfy these. So civilization has to go about repressing certain desires. Now what that means is that civilization itself is a tool for repressing desires, for suppressing them, for sublimating them, which means distorting them into something more socially productive. And so he says civilization itself is at war with the id. It's not just your conscience that's at war with the id. Civilization has something like the social role of the conscious in the individual. And so civilization is at war with the id. But that means that civilized man is unhappy. What is... by what means does civilization do this? The answer is guilt. Civilization makes you guilty. Its chief tool is to make you feel guilt over things. And so civilization is like this big, grand parent standing watching you and saying, cut it out. Don't do it. You stay over there. And it uses guilt to enforce its mechanism. Of course, also the law, but the guilt is a huge part of this. And so he says the price we pay for civilization is a loss of happiness. Well, he even suggests that maybe civilization makes us neurotic. Part of the reason I want to talk about this is the fact that Hitler is in part inspired by these ideas and says there's a fundamental distinction between culture, which is an expression of the desires of the people, and civilization, which is at war with the desires of the people. Hitler sees himself as being on the side of culture as opposed to civilization. Well, however that may be, there are all sorts of criticisms of Freudian theory. One of them is that it has this character of being suspicious. One of the rules is that whatever interrupts the progress of the analytic work is itself a resistance that has to be overcome by the theory. So you say to the analyst, look, I think paying you $100 an hour isn't doing me any good. The analyst can say, well, why do you feel this way? That is a tool of resistance. We have to overcome that. And so you might think that's a sort of problem. A second problem is that actually people have done extensive studies of Freudian analysis and found that people who are treated don't do any better than people who are not treated. It seems to do no good to go to analysis. Now, yeah, here you see, God, you were charging me too much. So you're cured. Actually, you might think this is a problem for Freud. On the other hand, you might not. Even when I was studying Freud as an undergraduate, I thought, hold on a second, there's something problematic. I don't see why knowing the theory actually helps anybody. And so you could think the theory is right, even if the analysis that goes along with it isn't the cure. But Karl Popper advanced a far more influential critique. He said, wait a minute, real scientific theories like Einstein's make predictions. They are falsifiable. There could be evidence in favor of them, but also evidence against. Freud's theory, and he also says Marx's theory, really isn't like that. You can end up explaining anything. And so nothing actually, it's not a good thing that you can explain anything. There just can't be any content to the theory because there are no risky predictions. Einstein made risky predictions and he insisted people test them. And in 1919, they were very dramatically confirmed. But Freud responded to things that appeared to be counterexamples in a very different way. And so Popper's point is these theories really aren't falsifiable. There's always an explanation for everything. I had a pleasant dream. Aha, dreams are wish fulfillments. I had an unpleasant dream. Ah, the death wish. One of the things you desire is the unpleasant, and to be dead, and so on. It looks like now everything's explained, but that means the theory has no predictions. It doesn't actually have any real content. So yes, all you ever do is ask me about my feelings. How does that make you feel? Well, right. He says the same thing is true on Marx. And so here you see the Marxist pessimist claiming that the glass is half empty. Capital siphons off the workers' proto-revolutionary energy, draining them of their inherent nobility, driving them to crime, drugs, and the lottery, nihilistic rap and rock music, not to mention the debased theater of TV wrestling. But the optimist says, despite this, the workers have all these desires that cannot be destroyed, blah, blah, blah. Same thing. So the point is, once you introduce the death wish, in particular, the theory no longer makes any predictions. And so really it has no longer any scientific value. Nevertheless, it is something that has had a huge impact on writers and thinkers in a wide variety of fields. Next time we'll look at Luigi Pirandello and the way in which he puts these themes into